Alright, hello everybody, welcome to the channel. This is just the first of hopefully many videos that I'm going to be making on this car. Just kind of little tips and bits that I've done to give a little bit more power and a little more mods to this thing. So it's just about this video is just about the PI manifold swap. And a lot of people will say they're 50-50 on it. Some people will say that it did do something, it didn't do anything. A lot of people have had trouble with them, and a lot of people had no trouble with them. So I'm going to give you my experience and what I did to supplement this car with the swap. And first thing that I did, and I encourage everybody to do, especially if you have the tools and the time to do it, is take the cowl off. The cowl is probably going to be the biggest thing, especially on these cars from 98 to 2000. Anything with the NPI setup that's like this. Anything with this NPI setup. Not the aluminum intake that are on the earlier model cars, but specifically the ones that started using the plastic intake and didn't swap over to PI until 2001. But the cowl, this thing gets in your way all the time. It makes it really inconvenient, especially if you have the EGR still on, and it just creates a plethora of it's just a bad time. It's not good to have on. And you know, other than that, it's really an easy swap. So let me get into it here. All right, so first thing that I ended up doing when I had to put this on is I realized that, oh, the coolant crossover that goes into the center of the intake, that's not good because this intake is much taller, the runs are a lot thicker, and more, you know, supplement more power. So a lot of people will say, oh, just go get the other one for the PI engines. Just go get the other coolant crossover tube. I said, because I didn't have enough money, I just said I'd cut that right at here at the nipple. If you don't see down there, have a little clamp on there, and I just routed it from underneath the alternator all the way around here. I could make it a little bit shorter and routed it over to the other coolant tube, but it's all right. It works. It works well. It's done good for me. Coolant flows like it should. It's normal when it's pressurized. And second thing that I hear a lot of people say about when it comes to specifically the intake manifold itself is the alternator bracket. I don't think people will say that you have to use the other PI and intake manifold bracket for this. I don't think you need to, specifically because this fits on perfectly fine. Especially if you get the right generation with the one that's only got one of these, it works just fine. So you have to specifically look for one that's built around 01 to 05, because then they switched a couple things over and made just a few things different. But other than that, it's your stock alternator bracket will work. Don't listen to what other people say. Don't waste your money on it, especially if you got one of these cars with this specific generation intake. So another thing that I ended up doing was getting new injectors. New injectors will significantly boost this swap. And specifically because your old Motorcraft injectors are probably not going to be doing any good. Especially if you're sitting at like 120, 130,000 miles like I am right now. They're just not good. They don't flow well. They need some back flushing. If you can do back flushing, if you have that tool, go right ahead, do it. But otherwise, I just picked up these Explorer EV6 injectors for like a 98 Explorer. Same engine and everything. They work just fine. They've worked fine for however many thousand miles I've had this on, and it's a lot more worthwhile, especially if you get spark plugs and injectors. That's what I did when I swapped this over, and it works very well. Puts the power straight down to the floor like it should. Makes it feel like it's not a taxi cab anymore. Really helps it. And other little things that I've done is just intake, you know, from the P71, the earlier models, and then I took a 5.4 throttle body. A lot of people will say that the 5.4 throttle body doesn't work because this bracket right here that holds all your little things for your throttle. You have to get the specific 5.4. Not the one that comes up and around, but the one, I can't really describe it because I have to pull up a picture. I'll probably put one on screen of the one that's necessary. But I think if you go for Expeditions, either Expeditions or specific F250s, you can get this throttle body that matches up to this plenum where they're both 70 millimeters, perfect flow, perfectly fine. TPS voltage is perfectly fine. Nothing is a problem there, and everything, it all bolts up, it all links up. Nothing is an issue when it comes to that. It only takes maybe like a couple hours or just a couple short drives, maybe give it a couple wide open throttle pulls, and it'll readjust to that throttle body size. So other things, this is specifically for the NPI gaskets. A lot of people will tell you, do not use the NPI gaskets, you will get a leak. Use the PI gaskets, you won't get a leak. Just put it at the coolant ports, just blah, blah, blah. So people will say, I'm sure a lot of people who are trying to do the swap have already researched data on what gaskets to use. I originally, when I put this on the car, put the NPI gaskets on without silicone. And that created a huge vacuum leak at the runners, and it made the car run like crap. So I had to pull it off, put the PI gaskets on, and it started leaking coolant. Because I didn't know that you had to put some silicone at the boots of the coolant ports on the heads, and that created a lot of other issues, sucking in coolant into the intake ports, and not a good time. So what I ended up doing was taking the NPI gaskets, because they actually stick into the heads themselves, because they have the correct little I don't know what to call them. I'll just call them little nipples that stick into the actual heads themselves to keep it in place. So what I ended up doing was I took just a little dab of silicone at the corners of it. I'll probably put a picture up here just so y'all can see an example of what I did for this swap. And a lot of people on the Facebook groups and the Crown Vic forums will tell you, no, you can't do this, you can't, me, it's gonna run like this, it's gonna blah, blah, blah. You know, people will do what they do, tell you you're doing something wrong, obviously. And just dab a silicone at the corner of the ports, and then I fit it to the actual head. Put the bolts in the upside down so that it would fit in form. And then once it's almost fully dry, it's, you know, semi-dry to where it's sticking correctly, I just drop the intake down. Just completely drop it down, let them sink in, make sure everything is all linked up along the head surface. There's no actual unevenness between them. And then just torque everything down to the spec, however you do it, whatever you know, whichever intake you use it, they're all pretty much the same. The torque status is just 18 to 20 foot-pounds. And then when you do it cold, leave it overnight. And then when you officially run the car for the first time, it's probably gonna run a little shitty just because it's gotta get used to the new airflow and everything. But once you go take it for a drive, let the computer get adjusted and everything, it eventually, then you're gonna re-torque it down. I say torque it to 19 foot-pounds just so you get a little bit extra tightness on there, so it's not gonna be cracking anything or creating a lot of problems, because a lot of people, I've seen it happen. But lastly, the last thing I think you should do, especially when you're dealing with the battery, is make sure you're touching both terminals together when you take them off for around 10 to 20 seconds. Put it on, let the car run, turn it off again, turn it on, and then go for a drive. Let it get used to that idle, warm up a little bit, take it for the drive, you know, do the thing. But I mean, other than all what I've listed, it's been a very, very worthwhile swap. Very cheap upgrade. Instead of going to buy like a P51 intake or some other intake that is just stupid expensive, around $1,000. Even the professional products intake is just stupid expensive now. You can no longer find copies of them anymore. You can no longer find blueprints, nothing. You can't find anything on them. At least in my experience, I haven't found anything. So just this PI swap, people make it a lot more complicated than it has to be by telling you got to do this. I'm just showing you what I did, what works for me. Hopefully you can take some of this information and use it for your swap. But other than that, I'd say this is the most worthwhile swap you can do on these cars, especially on these cars. These little lamb whales here. But, you know, other than that little tidbit, I did end up trying to put this professional products intake plenum and throttle body on, but I never ended up getting it to work just because either my TPS voltage was a way out of whack or something else here was just not aligning correctly with it, because it's 75 millimeter in throttle body and plenum, so that might be what it is. And it's just, I should have gone with 70 millimeter, but it was just a Facebook find. It's, you know, it is what it is. Excuse me. But I mean, from what it is, this is just the most worthwhile swap. And please ignore my terrible EGR delete. I'm gonna get that fixed anyways. It's just really hard to get under that exhaust manifold. But Appreciate all y'all for watching. Hopefully some of these will really help you out. Otherwise, see y'all.